Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 141. Agnes' Surprise. Angie's gazed at the Dragonborns with a stupefied look on her face. She had never seen such striking scales from a demi-human before. Not only that, but their frills made them look very similar to the draconian race that dominated the world a couple of times throughout history. As she watched the young red-scaled Dragonborn play with the drunken dogfolk, she saw the overflowing natural strength and talent he had in the physical arts. The Dragonborn was clearly a novice, with his moves lacking efficiency and control, but his strength and power were clearly on par with veterans. She knew talent when she saw one. Agnes wouldn't admit to this, but she was considered to be one of the best physical fighters in the entire continent. She was the reason why Yuna's parents allowed her to travel so far from their home. So, when she admitted that someone was more talented than she was, it was the truth. Only when she heard the familiar banter and clashing personalities of the Dragonborns did she finally recognize the Komodo siblings. It was a jaw-dropping realization, as she couldn't reconcile the strong and overflowing talent of the Dragonborns to the meek and shy temperament of the Komodos. The difference was like night and day. They had their heads up and their shoulders straight, full of confidence. A complete departure from when she first met them on the outskirts of the mountain region. "Zion, you should have just let your brother do the job," Shiina admonished her little brother. "You are still far too impulsive with your actions." "Oh, come on. He's the one that started it." As she heard their names, her guess had turned out true. No matter how unbelievable it was, these were the weak Komodos who couldn't even learn a single one-star spell if their life depended on it. During their journey, Agnes had tried and failed to teach the Komodo siblings a couple of physical arts to protect themselves. But unfortunately, the physical limitation of their race prevented them from learning even a single one. It would have taken them years before they could pull it off. But now, judging from the elemental mana gathering at their bodies naturally, she knew that their new bodies were fully capable of mastering even high-star spells if they wanted to. "Oh, Miss Agnes, you're here." Shiina was the first to spot the battle maid, and she approached her with a cheerful hug. "You're really her, aren't you?" "You're Shiina," Agnes said, looking up and down at her white dragonborn body with disbelief. "Yup. Did you see how strong I was?" Zion butted in. "It's good to see you." Amisu shyly waved. Agnes looked at the siblings and saw that not one of them was less talented than Zion. They all emanated a kind of strength different from each other, yet equally as strong. "What happened to you all?" Agnes couldn't help but ask. The Dragonborns showed an excited expression the moment Agnes asked that question. It was as if they were just waiting for the chance to brag to her about Michael. "And speaking of the man, looks like we weren't needed after all." The Dragonborns all looked back as they recognized Michael's voice. The 11-year-old boy genius had arrived with the security centaurs behind him. They had heard about the commotion a minute ago and immediately dispatched a few officers, but they still got there too late. Michael slowly approached the old satyr to check up on him. "Are you fine?" he asked. Of course, boss. He's nothing but a child that got a bit too overzealous in his drinking," the satyr said. Even after he was harassed and assaulted, the satyr didn't take it to heart. Michael was relieved that nothing serious happened. But if things had escalated, he was comforted by the fact that Fudge would have notified him as soon as it happened. He then looked at the man responsible for this incident. The dogfolk was still passed out on the floor, with drool leaking out of his mouth. His cheeks were still red from inebriation even now. "First of all, let's get you sober," Michael said as he raised his hand towards the dogfolk and grabbed at the air. With his supreme skill, mana gathering, he used his mastery over the water mana and grabbed at all the alcoholic liquid in the dogfolk's bloodstream, evaporating it out of his skin. Steam billowed out of the drunkard, immediately turning him sober. The reddishness in his sagging cheeks disappeared as his eyes slowly gained clarity. Huh? Where am I? The dogfolk looked around and saw everyone looking at him curiously. I remember drinking, then walking in the streets, and then memories began to resurface in his mind like a collage of pictures. And as he realized what he had done, his head quickly swiveled over to the old satyr before prostrating on the floor. I'm sorry. I was too drunk to know what I was doing. After the incident, the dogfolk voluntarily surrendered himself to the security centaurs, who took him to jail for his crimes. Bro Mike, you should have seen me punch that guy, Zion bragged. Although a hit brash, my brother did end up neutralizing the situation, Shiina reported. Oh, Boss Michael. Have you met our benefactor? Jaku finally introduced Agnes to Michael, with the two looking at each other curiously. Even though they'd never met, Michael felt as if Agnes was looking at him as if she knew him already. I don't believe we've met, Michael said, offering his hand. Meanwhile, Agnes just stared at Michael. Perhaps seeing the Komodos transform into dragon-like creatures was not the biggest surprise she had seen that night. It was witnessing Michael manipulate the dogfolk's very own blood to disintegrate the inebriation out of his very insides. If she were to be completely honest, it was a little bit terrifying to see the ease with which he did that. If he could do that to someone, then nothing could prevent him from simply stopping someone's heart by depriving it of blood. Chapter 142. Familiar Song. Michael looked at Agnes and saw the weird expression on her face. Do I know her or something? Why is she looking at me like she knows me? I apologize for my behavior, Agnes said after realizing she had been staring at his face for a few seconds. I am Agnes, a female ogre, and I serve as the attendant of the Montgomery family. Michael heard that last name before. According to Cerberus, they were one of the families that were well established in the Queen's region. He even said that it would do Michael good if he allied with one of them. He didn't think he would meet them so soon. Welcome to our nation, he said to Agnes. I am Michael Vanderbilt. The two shook hands, with Michael noting her solid physical strength just from her grip alone. Analyzing magic. Magic theory acquired. Tribulation skin hardening. Physical arts. Earth and fire element. This magic allows the user to achieve an enhanced defense. Due to the combination of earth and fire mana, this spell gets stronger the more damage the user incurs. Michael was glad that he was widening the selection of physical arts in his repertoire. But if he wanted to synthesize spells, then he needed a lot more. A library's worth more. Aren't the Montgomerys a diplomatic family famous for their connections? Maybe I can ask them where I could learn a lot of physical art spells in the Queen's region, Michael thought to himself. Are you liking our nation so far? He asked her. It was important to know how his nation fared compared to the other territories in the Queen's region if he wanted to compete there. Agnes looked around the streets, observing the lights and festivities all around. I am a knight who knows nothing but fighting, but I am sure that everything you have shown me here will blow away everyone in the Queen's region, she said truthfully. Michael nodded, proud at what he and his allies had achieved this past year. By the way, what brings you here? He asked her. Agnes opened her mouth to say something, when all of a sudden, the speakers posted all over the streets suddenly emitted a crackling sound. CCCRRKKK. Someone was on stage. Someone other than a Rebornian was about to perform a song. This was part of the events in the music festival. Since this whole thing was intended to find and nurture musical talents from all over the King's region, Michael invited anyone and everyone who had the musical talent to show off their skills on the stage. If they showed any promise, then they would immediately be recruited into the nation as an official citizen, meaning they would have the privilege of awakening their talent or evolving their bloodline. This time, it seemed that the new singer was a guitarist as a single strum sounded out through the speakers. Michael was going to ignore it, but then, the guitarist began to play a serene melody on the stage, something completely different from what he and the others had been hearing the whole night. He whipped his head towards the stage. Those chord progressions, those melodies, those heart-wrenching plucking of the strings. It was something familiar to him. Something he hadn't heard ever since he had reincarnated into this world. As the instrumental intro continued to play, parts of Michael's memory began resurfacing. These weren't memories of the young genius son of the Vanderbilt family. It was the memories of the old jaded Michael who stayed in his room all day with his head stuck on the computer screen. This was the song that saved him from feeling depressed, from feeling listless, and from feeling as if nothing mattered in the world. He thought he would never get to hear this song again. What's going on, ChatJK3? Did you teach this song to one of the musicians? They have not learned this song from the system. ChatJK3 answered. Boss? What's wrong? The Dragonborns realized that there was something wrong with Michael. He wasn't acting as the easygoing leader that they had met. He looked emotional, he looked pained. Michael ignored everybody and slowly made his way to the stage. His steps quickened as the song progressed, nearing the end of its intro. I am with you, through the moon. The angelic voice of a woman spread all over the nation, catching the attention of everyone listening. They all turned towards the singer on stage, wondering what kind of language she was singing. It sounded alien to them. But even though they couldn't understand her, and her voice didn't have the same effects as the Rebornian musicians that sang before her, there was an intangible quality in her voice that urged them to listen more. What is she singing? I don't know, but it sounds beautiful. Who is that girl? Michael was the only one who understood. That was English. Those were the exact lyrics of his favorite song. With the same cadence, the same tone, and the same emotionality that captured the hearts of millions of people back in his previous life. And that voice, even though it sounded a little bit younger than what he was familiar with, it was still the same voice that had people shouting and cheering for in any concert she performed. This was no mere coincidence. There was something strange going on here. Star-crossed lovers. That's all that matters. Michael's steps got faster and faster until he was fully sprinting towards the center stage. In all our lives, you were the one. With everyone crowding the stage, Michael couldn't see anything. Solidified wind suddenly manifested beneath his soles, allowing him to traverse the air. As he got closer and closer, he saw the black-haired girl in the middle of the stage. The spotlight shone down on her, making her look ethereal under the night, just like how he saw her back in his previous world. Michael stopped in the air, staring eye to eye with Yuna. The only thing he could think about was, she reincarnated. And as Yuna looked at the boy floating in front of her, she knew. He was the one the goddess was talking about. He's the reincarnator. Chapter 143, Yuna Kim. Yuna Kim had reincarnated into this world about 1 year later than Michael. She met the goddess when she died and lived the life of a baby for the next 10 years of her life. Just like Michael, she was under the impression that she was the only reincarnator in this world. The goddess only told her to enjoy a comfortable life here, and sent her on her merry way into the circle of reincarnation, leaving out the fact that someone had been here before her 1 year earlier. Born as the youngest daughter of the Montgomery family, Yuna completely immersed herself in this new life, forgetting about her life as a K-pop star in her previous life. Just like Michael, she had shown great talent even as early as 5 years old. Because of her background as a dancer in her previous life, her hand-to-eye coordination was excellent enough to allow her to master the way of the rapier much easier than everybody else, earning her the title of a once-in-a-million genius. But she didn't want to spend her new life fighting monsters and training under her master for 15 hours every day. So, she chose to follow in her grandmother's footsteps and become a diplomat, which basically meant that it was her job to make friends through every territory on the continent. She then spent most of her early years absorbing books and learning all the wisdom that her grandmother had to offer. But one day, she suddenly saw a few wizards playing a familiar game with each side having 16 pieces to play with. It was chess. If she wasn't facing a mirror practicing her moves for her concerts, Yuna spent most of her time playing online chess on her phone. After exhausting her body, she would always want to exercise her brain as well by playing rapid chess for hours at a time. Eventually, she became really good at it. She would have never thought she would see chess again in this life. But she didn't think someone from her previous life introduced it to this world. She just thought that another genius had created a similar game by coincidence. After all, she considered this as a parallel Earth with lots of differences but a few that were the same as with the original Earth. So, she played chess with the mages and was able to beat them every single time. She even made a wager with them to teach her demi-human attendants some magic if they lost against her. Eventually, the mages learned their lesson. They couldn't beat her, and they also spent too much effort teaching the demi-humans simple magic. So, they stopped playing with her. Wanting to empower her attendants and her loyal friends more, she eventually decided to go to the king's region to seek out Cerberus Augendor, who had access to a big collection of spells in his magic library, as well as a penchant for making bad wagers. Before she left, her grandmother approached her and told her about her fiancé, Michael Vanderbilt, the youngest son of the richest family in the world. Of course, she had no intention of following an arrangement that she did not make. Not only that, but she was basically an adult in a child's body. So, she decided to take a peek at her supposed fiancé and make sure that the arrangement with him was broken off before anything serious happened. As she entered the king's region, she saw things that weren't supposed to be in this medieval world at all. The roads were made of concrete, the villages had running water coming out of faucets, and most of all, pavements were filled with automobile cars running throughout the entire region. This was an advancement in technology that wasn't supposed to be here at all, especially in the king's region, which was considered to be the rural part of the continent. She started to suspect something at this point. Someone from her previous life had to have reincarnated as well, and they brought with them the technology from their previous world. She wanted to find out who this mysterious reincarnator was, and the only one who could answer her question was the goddess herself. Upon visiting the church and meeting with the goddess for the second time in this life, the only answer given to her was, "There is only one other reincarnator in this world," she said with a mischievous smile on her face. "And you'll find them where you're already going." Yuna could only think to herself, the nation of Reborn? She should have known. The name was already a dead giveaway. They clearly influenced the adorable slime, Fudge, from a famous anime, which was coincidentally one of her favorite TV shows of all time. And when she traveled to the parched lands to reach the nation of Reborn, she was even more surprised at how advanced this place was. It looked more like a modern city from a second-world country from her previous life. The sight of light bulbs, air conditioners, refrigerators, and most importantly toilets, almost made her cry from happiness. The convenience and comfort that she could only get from electrical appliances was one of the things she sorely missed from her previous world. It didn't take long before she got her answer as to who this mysterious reincarnator was. It was none other than her supposed fiancé, Michael Vanderbilt. She couldn't believe the coincidence. The only other reincarnator was also her fiancé? Suspicious. It made her think that the goddess had something to do with it, especially with how much she was having fun not saying anything about him to her. She wanted to meet with him, and fortunately, there was a stage already set for her to perform. She borrowed a guitar and started playing one of her most famous songs, one that reached the all-time top rankings on a music website, taking first place for 20 consecutive weeks. And then he appeared. Just from one look alone, she knew he recognized the song. And from the shock written on his face, she knew that he didn't know there was another reincarnator in this world. Chapter 144. Refreshing Conversation. Michael stared at Yuna, speechless. Seeing his favorite K-pop idol reincarnated into the same world as he was made him almost lose all functions. Meanwhile, Yuna finished her song and bowed to the audience. Her experience as a singer showed in this moment, allowing her to gracefully exit the stage without anyone knowing that she was flustered. As she walked off the stage, she looked up at Michael and gestured for him to follow her. Michael floated down and followed her backstage, where they could finally talk alone. She quickly turned around, leaning forward with her hands on her back. "Are you from my old world?" Yuna asked him in English. "She is asking you a question, Michael." Only when ChatJK3 rang out in his head did he finally break out of his stupor. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just confused." "You're Yuna Kim?" he asked, still trying to reconcile the image of the K-pop idol to the girl she was now. Yuna shook her head. No, I'm a Montgomery now. The Yuna Kim you mentioned is dead. Michael looked at her and only now realized something. If she reincarnated into this world the same as he did, then that could only mean that she died in their previous world. And he knew better than to ask for the circumstances of her death. But there was something that he found weird though. Even though she reincarnated, her face still looked the same as her face before, only younger. If she was older, then he would have thought she had somehow transported herself to this world without dying. Meanwhile, he gained a new body and a new face completely different from his old one. Is this because my death is accidental? Michael asked ChatJK3, but his personal AI assistant had no answer. I love what you've done with this place, Yuna said, looking at the modern buildings around them. I would have also wanted to make electricity, but I don't know anything about that. Michael was the same as her. He knew nothing about the mechanics of how an automobile or a toilet worked. It was all thanks to ChatJK3. I had help, he replied to her. Yuna stopped walking and looked back at him. Probably a gift from the goddess, right? I have one myself too, but it's more focused on fighting. Sometimes it feels like too much of a cheat, you know? Yeah, I understand what you feel, Michael said smiling. It was refreshing to talk to someone who knew exactly what he was feeling. No matter how much he loved his parents Lilia and Bart, he couldn't bear to tell them that he had reincarnated from another world. He was afraid that they would think that he wasn't their son, only an alien taking his place. Did you reincarnate as a baby too? He asked her. It was so boring, she complained. I was this close to telling my parents that I could speak just so that I could entertain myself from their reactions. Michael chuckled. He thought of that too. I kept myself busy gathering mana. Yuna walked up to him and playfully shoved him with her finger. You cheat. My talent lies in physical arts, so I couldn't do anything as a baby. But I wish the goddess had just given me a talent just like yours. Michael smiled and smugly nodded his head. Yup, the goddess owes me quite a bit, so she had to make my life a lot more comfortable. I was able to make a working shower when I was 5 years old. Yuna crossed her arms and pouted. I'm so jealous. Oh yeah, and I made some soap. Michael and Yuna began talking about their experiences in this life, all the hardships and the happiness. Despite being from two completely different backgrounds, one being a normal nerdy guy stuck in his room all day, and the other being an extroverted K-pop idol worshipped by millions, Michael didn't feel awkward talking to her at all. I guess that's the reason why she's beloved by all. She's really easy to talk to, Michael thought to himself. You have to make ice cream, Yuna said, almost begging Michael. Please. You have to. It's your responsibility as the only one who could make it. I am planning to, he said, gently appeasing her. Hey, no making fun of me. It's been living in a medieval world for too long, and you've been living quite a comfortable life here in your nation, she said, eyeing him down. That's why I'm planning on expanding my company to the Queen's region, he explained to her. I want to start selling faucets, concrete, and maybe even electricity there. Yuna's eyes widened. Yes, you should totally do that. You know what, I'll even help you free of charge. Our family is quite famous for our connections, you know? Really? He said, with his eyebrows raising. I haven't been doing nothing these past 10 years, you know? I've been immersing myself in the political landscape of the entire continent to the point that I know all the major players in the territories. I think I can help you, of course, with a price. Maybe a box full of ice cream would suffice, Yuna said with greed, her eyes already filled with ice cream cones of cookies and cream. Michael thought for a second. That would actually help me a lot. We're just about to finish our preparations on our highway road leaving for the Queen's region. It was at this point that Yuna realized something about Michael. You know, you said that it's your cheat skill that does everything for you. But I don't think that had anything to do with the fact that you could ally with the Dwarven Kingdom, she said genuinely. Everything I've learned about the dwarves tells me that they don't care about material things. Dragons offered them hoards of gold. Elves offered them magic. Humans tried giving both. None of them succeeded. But you alone did. How did you do it? Michael shrugged his shoulders. If I'm being honest, I didn't do anything at all. But Yuna knew that wasn't true. Just the fact that demi-humans were so accepted in every society in the King's region told her that Michael had fostered something that the dwarves liked so much that they were willing to open their doors. No matter how Michael said that he was just a normal guy, Yuna thought differently. Chapter 145. Plans for the Queen's Region. As Michael and Yuna walked through the streets of the nation of Reborn, two certain individuals were following them from behind, giggling and whispering to themselves. Look, madam, you were right. We don't have to do anything and they would find themselves in each other's company, Fudge said. Fufufu, yes. It is good, little Fudge. Even if they're just friends for now, we'll make sure that it can develop into something more, Lilia said mischievously as she held Fudge in her hands. Meanwhile, Yuna and Michael continued their conversations about their plans for the future. At first, Michael thought he would be too starstruck to even stand near the Yuna Kim. But he was far too relieved at talking to a fellow Earthling that he consciously tried to ignore the fact that he was talking to a person he and millions of other people called a goddess of dancing and singing. It also helped that Yuna didn't mention anything about her past life. All she talked about was her life as the youngest daughter of the Montgomery family. You've just turned 10 years old. That means you must have just had your talent awakening, he asked her. I did. Before I arrived here, I visited the church in Kingsbridge City where I met the goddess again. She was the one who told me that there was another reincarnator in this world, though she didn't tell me who it was. Michael nodded. He knew that the goddess could be quite a joker at times. Can I ask about your talent? He asked her cautiously. If he was talking to Yuna Kim, he wouldn't be asking such an intrusive question. Heck, he wouldn't even be talking to her. Thankfully, Yuna Montgomery didn't mind. My talent is called Heavenly Sword Dancer. Yuna suddenly raised her hands and performed her moves, acting as if she had a rapier in her hands. She swiftly swung, pierced, and sliced the air with her movements, which Michael could only describe as something very similar to dancing. And if he wasn't seeing it wrong, it even looked like she incorporated some of her iconic dance moves into her stances. Suddenly, Michael heard a notification ring out in his head. Analyzing talent. Yuna Montgomery. Magic. SS class. Element mastery. Water, air. Magic purity. 95%. Mana quantity. 34,592 mana. Talent. SSS class Heavenly Sword Dancer. Realm. 4-star Fencer. Skills. Musical stance. The user's physical stat increase is directly correlated to the fluidity, gracefulness, timing, and expressiveness of their movement. Where did you learn to train your physical arts? Michael asked her. Yuna then explained to him about the Order of the Heavenly Knights, and how they were the equivalent of the Guild of Arcana for physical arts users. She told him that they were the foremost experts in everything related to spells that were cast inwards rather than outwards. That's good to know. Maybe I'll visit them in the Queen's region. Michael thought that this was a good goal to set because he needed a lot of physical art spells so that ChatJK3 could improve its software enough to synthesize new and customized physical art spells at will. It would be great if they had a magic library, Michael thought to himself. He could already hear ChatJK3 salivating at the thought. I did no such thing, ChatJK3 retorted. Michael, are you listening? Yuna said, a bit upset that he hadn't been listening to her. Sorry. I was thinking about my plans in the Queen's region, he said truthfully. Yuna walked in front of him and stopped him in his tracks. Why don't you tell me? Maybe I can help you. You know about our plans to open the highway to the Queen's region from the Dwarven Kingdom, right? We need somewhere good to place our headquarters, somewhere that can connect to a lot of other places. This was a vital decision. For example, creating their headquarters at Kingsbridge City allowed them to be in the center of everything in the King's region, allowing for easy expansion for their business. However, territories in the Queen's region were a little bit more disjointed, with a lot of isolated territories that weren't connected with each other. There is one good territory that fits your criteria, Yuna said after a long deliberation. Orcus Town. They are usually a place where a lot of peddlers converge, which makes for a very busy town, business-wise. Michael was elated upon hearing this. But judging from the tone in her voice, he knew there was a but coming. But, Orcus has become somewhat of a ghost town these days, Una said, her eyes downcast as she reminisced about what she saw firsthand. Elaborate, Michael asked, intrigued. What was once a prosperous town filled with both human and demi-human citizens has now been turned into a lawless place because of an unfortunate disaster that left them in a time of famine and drought. They had already asked for help from the Order of Heavenly Knights, but because of the distance and rough terrain, it would take them a long time before they would arrive. It was one of my duties to assure the people of Orcus Town that everything would be fine once the knights arrived, but I was already too late. As a future diplomat, it was Yuna's job to solve any conflicts or problems occurring in every territory on the continent, including disaster relief. She was supposed to make sure to relay any help requests from Orcus Town. But once she got there, they asked for none. They had already lost hope. Why did they ask for help from the Order? Why not the Guild of Arcana? Won't mages be a better help? Mages could move boulders and make water out of nothing. If the town needed resources, then a wizard was their friend, not a knight. That's the thing, Una said hesitantly. Orcus Town is also famous for one thing, orcs, and because of the famine, the two biggest tribes of orcs started shouting at each other. Chapter 146, Situation in Orcus Town. Orcus Town used to be an extremely popular hotspot for business. It was a place where a lot of companies competed against each other to get a spot in the wet market visited by thousands of people each day. They used to consider it a good marker for a company if they were able to retain a center spot in the market without losing any customers. But because of its proximity to the mountain ranges dividing the Kings and Queens region, they were also subject to a lot of natural disasters such as landslides and earthquakes. Of course, it took a lot of money and time to renovate and reconstruct any broken establishments in the town, something that not a lot of people thought was worth it. Eventually, people began to leave the town, with the cracks in the roads and buildings no longer getting repaired each time a disaster struck. This led to a further degradation of the town, which forced more and more people to migrate to other places. This continued to escalate until the landslide last year finally destroyed their farms and disrupted the clean river they relied on for fresh water. Because of this, the two orc tribes living near the town were forced to clash against each other in a bid for the few remaining resources available in the area. Thankfully, these two orc tribes didn't use violence against humans or demi-humans in their civil war. They used a unique approach to settle their fight. They tried to assert dominance against each other just like how gorillas did it, by banging their chests with pride and shouting at each other until either of them admitted that they were the lesser tribe than the other. Because of this, no one in town could sleep properly. Aside from being hungry and thirsty, they also had to deal with the problem of having their ears assaulted by shouts and yelling non-stop throughout the night. Unfortunately, all the posturing that the orcs did ended up scaring away any potential peddlers that could have brought them food and nourishment. It came to a point where only knights could solve this problem. They would either force the two orc tribes to reconcile or force them to migrate to another location. If worst comes to worst, then Kruger, their fellow orc and one of the heavenly knights as master of the Way of the Axe, would come and show them that he could shout louder than all of them combined. That's the situation in the town, Una explained. It was impressive how comprehensive Una's knowledge was about Orcus Town. She even knew what the Order would do to solve the problem. I have to stop thinking about her as a K-pop idol, Michael thought to himself. Orcus Town looks like the perfect place to start my company in the Queens region. Although most people in the Queens region considered Orcus Town as not worth it, Michael knew that he could fully bring it to its full potential, just like how he was able to turn the desolate parched lands into a paradise for everyone. Their problem with resources could easily be solved by Michael's automobile. Their problem of deteriorating establishments could be solved with concrete. As for the orcs, Michael had a plan for them too. Michael turned to Una. Can you help me? I don't know much about the Queens region, and clearly you do. A wide grin formed on Una's face. Of course I will. The day after the music festival, the streets of the nation of Reborn continued to be filled with tourists, wanting to explore the paradise in the desert. They seemed to have fallen in love with everything this nation had to offer. Once they experienced the cool air of the air conditioner, they couldn't seem to go back to a life with just fanning themselves using a giant leaf. The Rebornians even had to make more inns and hotels to accommodate everyone who wanted to stay in their nation for a longer time. Not only that, but Reborn Nation also had something to offer that no one else in the world could offer. And that was access to the Dwarven Kingdom. It didn't take long for people to realize that the strange metal containers connected to each other, which Rebornians called trains, led into the very heart of the Dwarven Kingdom itself. For a very reasonable 100 gold coins, they could use the train and travel inside the gates of the Dwarven Kingdom, where they could explore and see everything that was closed off to humans for thousands of years. It was a surreal experience, especially since the Dwarven Kingdom was also connected with electricity. It was like a more exotic part of Reborn Nation. Byru, the king of the dwarves, was initially a little bit hesitant after Michael proposed this idea. It was one thing to let humans travel to their kingdom, it was another thing entirely to let them stay inside it for an extended period of time. However, he couldn't argue against the fact that the amount of gold coins they gained from tourists far outweighed anything they could ever sell or produce. The Dwarven King finally understood why Michael was so receptive to tourists. It was all because of money. The dwarves became extremely hospitable to the tourists, especially since the gold coins they earned allowed them to buy more beer and other products from the nation of Reborn. Michael, my friend. On the second day, Byru also traveled to the nation of Reborn to sightsee. Of course, his main objective for this visit was to get more beer for his personal collection, as well as play a little bit of baseball while he was at it. "It's good to see you," Michael said as he shook hands with the Dwarven King. "I think that it's time for us to implement the highway system we've been talking about." The Dwarven King gave Michael a weird look. "You said that we weren't ready yet." But then, he suddenly saw a girl appear from behind Michael. Chapter 147. Gathering of VIPs. Meanwhile, somewhere in the depths of the Queen's region, there was a group of longtime friends who sat on a circular table, playing cards and drinking ale to pass the time. They all had gray thinning hair, wrinkly skin, and stooped postures. They were old, real old. Despite that, there was one thing about them that was still full of fire and vigor, and that was their eyes. It still showed the same relentless hunger they had when they were younger. And now, their age had allowed them to gain wisdom and knowledge to act carefully yet decisively. At the very end of the circular table was a man whose legendary name reverberated throughout the whole world. It was none other than the ruthless lion of the business realm, Eyes Vanderbilt. "My friends, when has it been since we last convened like this? We should do it more often," he said to his cohorts. In response, the bald old man with sunken eyes and a dark complexion next to him scoffed. "We are not even acquaintances, Eyes, certainly not even friends. We are your rivals." That man was the founder of the Hephaestus Company, renowned for supplying the whole world with quality weapons and armor. Eyes shrugged his shoulders. "Forgive me for treating you all as such. I feel as if we have all bonded together as we fought on the battlefield we call the market. Who else am I going to call friends if not for my fellow men and women who lead a conglomerate comparable to mine?" That was right. Gathered in this room were the very heads and founders of the leading conglomerates of this world. These few and select groups of people held the world in their hands. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the entire market would crash if something were to happen to this very room. Of course, they had proper defenses to prevent such cases, but the fact that the possible disappearance of these people could create such chaos in the world was more than enough to state their importance. "Lighten up, everybody. It was merely a jest. You don't need to act so offended that I called you all my friends." Eyes chuckled to himself. In a room full of people with net worths in the trillions of gold coins, Eyes was the only one among them who had a carefree enough attitude to crack jokes. After all, every one of them here considered Eyes as their ultimate rival. It was their life's goal to someday topple the legendary Lion Vanderbilt from his title of the wealthiest man alive. Because of that, they never let down their guard in front of him. But somehow, Eyes never even felt the pressure. He regarded them as his friends, and treated their competitiveness as nothing more than banter. It was as if he knew that they could never oust the Vanderbilt name from being the most successful company in the world. This definitely annoyed most of them, which Eyes seemed to love doing. The old woman sitting next to Eyes finally had enough and raised her hand. Let's just get to the chase, shall we? We are all taking precious time away from our companies to discuss something important happening in the world. She was the owner of Goldstone Group, the foremost company in real estate and property management. That is right. Another old woman with pink hair nodded. This is a matter that will affect all of us. And despite how we are all competing against each other, we are still living in one world. It will be beneficial for all of us if we exchange information. This particular elder owned the largest apothecary company in the world, making their money from selling potions and managing hospitals. Eyes crossed his arms and cracked his neck. So, what did you all find out? Don't act like you don't know, said the old bald man. I just want to know what you know, Eyes retorted. The whole room fell into silence before another old man on the other side of the table finally opened his mouth. We need to talk about what's happening overseas. The Ocean King and the Draconic Overlord have finally reached an accord. This has tremendous consequences in our continent. That guy was none other than the head of the Osborne family, the only other family that was in contention against the Vanderbilt family for supremacy over the markets. And with his no-nonsense attitude, he announced the root of their problem without waiting for anybody else. This was quite disadvantageous for him because he was telling everyone privileged information that others could use against him, but he didn't care. Well, what do you know? We do have the same information, Eyes said, teasingly. You know what this means, right, Eyes? I do, Eyes replied. This means profits will be up for grabs. One of the things that made it troublesome for people to cross the oceans and travel to other continents was because of the treacherous body of water between them. There were naturally occurring whirlpools that spawned out of nowhere, thunderous storms that could form in the middle of calm seas, and even towering tsunamis that were impossible to cross over. Despite his rule over the mighty seas, the Ocean King never helped anyone cross his territory. They were allowed to, but at their own risk. Meanwhile, the Draconic Queen, with her complete rule over all the dragons, used her subjects to offer long-distance journeys crossing continents for a very hefty sum of gold coins. It was a very fruitful business. However, the dragons were still subject to the whims of the natural ocean. They were still troubled by storms and tornadoes trying to cross the unforgiving seas. At least they used to. Now, the Ocean King and the Dragon Queen have made an agreement. The details were unknown, but there was one thing clear. The dragons could now cross the ocean without any fear of disasters. The Ocean King would give them protection from the mighty seas. This would make intercontinental travel extremely easier, letting more people travel abroad without much risk to their lives. In short, there would be more tourists in the coming years. Rich tourists with gold to spend. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to restart the Golden Road. Eyes declared to the room with a smile on his face. What was the Golden Road? It was a network of trade routes that connected all the territories of the Queen's region. And where did this route start? It was none other than Orcus Town. Chapter 148. Golden Road. The Golden Road used to be a place where commerce and trade were abundant. It was a market filled with the exchange of goods from all over the continent, creating demand and supply that eventually made everyone prosper in the long run. It was where Eyes Vanderbilt and a lot of other people in this room had their start. Eyes started as a lowly peddler in the Golden Road, trekking the entire continent trying to sell spice and silk to earn a couple of bronze coins to spend. Eventually, he grew his business into what it was now. However, due to the disasters occurring in merchant ships while crossing the different continents, the trade of exotic goods and items eventually came to a stop. Eyes and a lot of other companies didn't think it was worth it to spend billions of gold on buying a ship, manning it with a crew, and sending it on a months-long journey just for them to die in the ocean. They lost a lot of money trying to keep the Golden Road. Eventually, they lost too much and stopped investing in the Golden Road altogether, leading to its degradation and eventual demise. As much as I hate to agree with you, you're right, the bald old man muttered. The Hephaestus Company would earn a lot from selling armor on the Golden Road. I'm sure there will be a lot of weary and tired travelers landing in our continent after traveling by dragon wings, said the pink-haired old woman. Dragon wings were what they called the service dragons offered to transport people across oceans to another continent. People often experienced nausea after traveling with the dragons, which the old woman could take advantage of by selling medicine to cure their sickness. Having a lot of tourists will certainly help all of us. They'll need a place to stay, said the old woman who owned a lot of inns and taverns in the Queen's region. So we're all in agreement then? We shall re-establish the Golden Road and fill our coffers with enough gold coins that will even make the dragons feel insecure. Eyes claimed, his eyes burning with passion yet again. The whole room went silent as they began making plans in their heads. They knew that whoever controlled the Golden Road would eventually control the entire market of the Queen's region. If they played it right, they could essentially monopolize the profits to be made off of those tourists from the other continents. To do that, they needed to create a hub for the Golden Road. The hub was where people and products landed and where everything was distributed, meaning that if they controlled the hub, they could control where and how the products would be sold. Each of these conglomerate leaders had plans to make a hub of their own. They would transform one of their territories and make it popular enough to entice tourists. If it was popular enough, more and more people would choose to land there rather than anywhere else on the Golden Road, making it a hub for commerce and tourism. To do that, they needed a place that was connected to a lot of places in the Queen's region, a place that had a direct route towards even the deepest parts of the continent. There was already one place perfect as a hub for the Golden Road. It was none other than Orcus Town. They used to be the official hub of all trade coming in and out of the Queen's region. It was the best place to distribute products all over the continent because of its interconnecting routes in different territories. Orcus Town was like the bottom vein of a leaf. All the roads from this vein spread outwards into the edges, allowing nutrients to travel evenly in the leaf. Because of that, Orcus Town used to be a place that had fierce competition among companies. Whoever could get a spot in the town could have their hands on the very pulse of the Golden Road itself. But because of natural disasters and the eventual degradation of the Golden Road, Orcus Town became nothing more than a shell of itself. It became a ghost town. Even now, Eyes and the rest of the people in the room considered Orcus Town as a lost cause. The place had collapsed beyond repair. They would rather rebuild the hub in their territories, in the hopes that they would be able to control it in the future. Even Eyes was hard at work, thinking with his hands in his mouth. But just then, someone knocked on the door and entered the room. Eyes recognized him as one of his attendants. He ordered them not to disturb the room unless absolutely necessary. So, whatever he had to say was definitely something important. "Sir, I have some news," said the butler as he bowed towards Eyes. Seeing his friends glaring at him for being too loud, Eyes chose to leave the room and listen to his attendant's report. A minute passed after Eyes left the room, when all of a sudden, they all heard a burst of raucous laughter coming from the door. Everyone gazed at the door with a curious look. They had never heard Eyes laugh that hard since forever. He wasn't even that happy when the Vanderbilt Company gained global dominance. The door then opened, and Eyes returned to the room. "Why were you laughing?" they asked him. Eyes chuckled and sat back down to his seat. "I just heard something very interesting. I don't think any of you are going to believe me even if I told you, so I won't tell you. But things have changed now. We will still establish a new Golden Road, but I have a proposition for you all." The people at the table listened carefully to Eyes' next words. "I will not be participating in the Golden Road, for as long as you all don't participate as well. Let's let our descendants fight it out." Gasps rang out in the room. They had never heard such a bold proposal from Eyes. It was uncharacteristic of him. He would never suggest that in a million years unless something serious happened. It made them wonder what kind of news he heard from his butler. Chapter 149. Fight of the Descendants. Everyone gazed at Eyes silently, with their minds constantly turning as they tried to figure out the reason for his sudden change of heart. The Vanderbilt Lion would never willingly back out of a competition, especially one against his friends. After all, each of the people in this room was a real threat to his dominion over the global market. The Golden Road was the chance they needed to finally overtake the Vanderbilt business. Eyes would be an idiot to let his less-than-stellar descendants handle the business in the Golden Road rather than himself. He was far too selfish to do that. You want to create a playground for the children? The old bald man asked him. I do, Eyes replied with a devious grin on his face. They all exchanged silent looks as they tried to decipher the hidden agenda in Eyes' plans. After years and years of getting bested by the Vanderbilt lion, they knew Eyes well enough to know that he wasn't going to make a bet that he knew he wouldn't win. Even still, no matter how much they thought about it, this proposal was beneficial for them all. The biggest benefit of it all was the fact that the main man himself, Eyes, wasn't going to dip his hands in the Golden Road business. Even if they weren't going to admit it outwardly, they knew that Eyes Vanderbilt had a high chance of dominating the Golden Road market if they had all fought head-on against each other. Some of them were even considering fighting just for the second-place position from the start. That was how much of a threat he was. But now that Eyes promised to stay his hand as long as they stayed theirs, then this meant that they had a much greater chance of finally overcoming the mountain that was the Vanderbilt business. Sure, they wouldn't be able to use their full resources to conquer the Golden Road, but that also meant that Eyes wouldn't be able to use his immense wealth to bully his way through the market. It would all come down to their descendants and their subcompanies. It was the battle of the future heirs and future inheritors of these conglomerates. And as far as they knew, no descendant of Eyes Vanderbilt could come close to his brilliance. Not even his direct children showed any sign of becoming a cub that could grow into a lion. Compared to the other conglomerates who all had a few standout descendants who were already showing their talents in the global market, the Vanderbilt family was sorely lacking in contenders for the competition in the Golden Road. I accept your proposal. Me too. I agree as well. Everyone raised their hands to quickly solidify their agreement. They didn't want to give Eyes any more time to second-guess himself and back out of this agreement. After all, this was the chance that they had been waiting for to finally defeat him. Eyes Vanderbilt smiled and raised the glass of mead in his hands, which the rest reciprocated. And so it is done. I wish all of you good luck in this competition. Eyes gulped down the whole glass. The others did too, with each one showing a satisfied smile on their faces, thinking that they had the upper hand. They were giddy at the fact that the Lion Vanderbilt had finally shown his weakness. And now it was time for them to strike. But of course, none of them was happier than Eyes himself. After all, he had just found out something incredibly amazing just a few minutes ago. His youngest grandson had allied himself with the Dwarven Kingdom. This was a feat that even he was unable to do. It was absurd to think that Michael was only a child, yet he was able to do something that even none of these conglomerates could ever dream of doing. It was so absurd that he had to laugh. Ha 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 ha. Michael, I knew that you had my killer instinct within you. Show me. Show me more. Show everyone that the Vanderbilt name is never dead. I will be waiting for you at the end of the Golden Road. Back in the nation of Reborn, after Michael introduced Yuna to the Dwarven King, the plan for the highway was quickly set into motion. With Yuna's expertise in diplomacy, she immediately outlined a plan to contact Orcustown and gain their trust. Once that was done, they could connect the concrete roads to the Queen's region, opening up the possibilities for expansion. Of course, Michael first needed to personally visit the town and see the place for himself. He and a couple of the Rebornian engineers needed to scout the current situation in the area and make plans to reinforce the entire structure to make it less prone to disasters. Oh, Byru, I'm planning on connecting the railway to the other parts of the King's region. What do you think about it? He asked the Dwarven King. Sure. The more tourists there are, the better, Byru said while wearing a baseball jersey and drinking a beer in his hands. After seeing the positive feedback from the tourists, Michael planned to connect both electricity and railways to the entirety of the King's region as soon as possible. We'll provide you with all the materials you'll need, Byru promised. Wait, you're planning on constructing railways all over the King's region and creating another steam turbine at the same time? Yuna questioned. That would cost too much money. Yuna estimated that the amount of materials it would take to complete those tasks was already in the hundreds of millions of gold. And she wasn't even accounting for the labor yet. Ha 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 ha. Looks like you still don't know much about my friend here. He's obscenely rich, you know? Byru said as he put his arms around Michael. You'll save so much more money if you start those projects separately, Yuna said. In response, Michael looked around the smiling tourists in his nation. I want them to experience the same comfort as our nation in their own homes. That's my endgame, he said to her genuinely. Yuna stared at Michael. He then shrugged his shoulders before walking away. Besides, it's just a couple of 100 million gold. Chapter 150, Journey to the Queen's Region. After some preparations, Michael was finally ready to journey to the Queen's Region using the highway system in the Dwarven Kingdom. Coming with him were the Dragonborn siblings, who refused to let Michael go anywhere without protection, as well as various Rebornians who could each contribute different skills and talents when needed. Yuna and her escorts also tagged along since they were already planning on going back to the Queen's Region. As much as she and the rest of her escorts wanted to stay in the nation of Reborn, her parents would freak out if she didn't return after a few months of travel. Her skills as a diplomat were also incredibly helpful in the Queen's Region. She would serve as a much-needed aid for Michael to navigate through the political landscape of a foreign land. Before they left, though, Michael left the nation in Lolo's hands, who proved himself adept at handling the Rebornians and keeping them in check. After the festival, the number of tourists remained high, which meant that everyone's workload increased significantly. Even though they had no electricity yet, people were already pre-ordering their own air conditioning systems and refrigerators to use in the future. Perhaps they just liked to see it in their houses to remind them of the good times they had in the nation of Reborn. But all in all, the amount of gold they earned from this ended up helping cover the costs of the new projects Michael had started in the King's Region. While he would be busy establishing the company in a new region, the Rebornians would be busy planning railroads and laying the foundations for the electric lines that would modernize everything and put it up to Rebornian standards. Thankfully, the mages and wizards from the Magic Tower offered their services to speed up the construction. It seemed that they were quite desperate for money to afford their own customized mithril wand artifact. It took them quite a few days before they finally reached the Dwarven Kingdom. There, they were greeted by eager dwarves who showed Michael the newly constructed concrete highway. It was divided into two, one for entering the Queen's Region, and one for leaving it. In the middle of this highway were tall street lamps that illuminated the whole place at night. Michael built this with the high-speed driving in mind, to make overnight trips much safer and faster overall. This is amazing. Thanks for your help, Michael said to the hard-working dwarves. Take the week off. I'll give you an all-expenses-paid trip to our nation for you and your families. Enjoy! The dwarves cheered after hearing this. They weren't able to join the music festival because of this project, so now they were glad they got to see their work had paid off. Meanwhile, in the depths of a forest, a couple of peddlers tried to hike through the uneven terrain of the land. Are you sure it isn't dangerous here? The youngest among them asked. No. There weren't any earthquakes last night, so the ground won't suddenly collapse under our feet, the oldest replied. That doesn't make me feel better. Why are we risking our lives here again? I thought this place was a ghost town, the youngest asked. The oldest peddler looked back. Orcus Town needs our help. They are dying of hunger and thirst. Buying our wares is their only way to survive. But just as they were about to climb over one of the uprooted trees, they suddenly heard a loud thumping sound echoing through the forest. It boomed through their bodies, rattling their very bones. Boo! To, boo! To, boo! To, ra, ta, ra, ta, ra, ta. The thumping sounds were accompanied by growls and guttural shouts, which continued to get louder and louder with each echo. It was at this point that they realized that those weren't echoes. Those were the culmination of hundreds of other creatures shouting at the top of their lungs, each one trying to outdo the other. The peddlers suddenly felt their hearts palpitate from the sheer deafening sound coming from the forest. The eldest peddler looked back at his team. Let's go back, he said decisively. Meanwhile, just up ahead of the forest was a gathering of orcs, with their pig-like snouts and their large, almost obese figures that made them look very intimidating even against their kind. On the left side were orcs who had wolf ears on the top of their heads, as well as patches of gray fur sparsely spread throughout their bodies. They called themselves the Orcanine tribe. On the right side were orcs who had very short ears and skin with rock-like patches that had spikes coming out of the roots. They were called the Orcupine tribe. Despite how it looked, these two orc groups were not the violent type. They made it their principle to solve their fight through a show of dominance. Boo! Two! The Orcanine tribe shouted, squatting and slapping their meaty thighs to produce a thumping sound. Ra! Ta! H! The Orcupine tribe answered, strumming the spikes on their bodies to imitate the sound of a snake rattling its tail. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.